Very excited. Been with New Japan now since October of 2015, and it was born out of the co-promotion relationship that we had at the time. I was the announcer for Ring of Honor, and then New Japan coming over and wanting to gain more of a foothold in the U.S. and promoting shows with Ring of Honor. It was a lot of fun getting to meet and work with those guys. While that was going on, New Japan World came into existence, and then after we had done shows through 2014, 2015, they asked if I would be interested in also doing English commentary for New Japan. So I went over. It'll be 7 years ago this month, October 15th, and did the first show, and wasn't very good. Didn't know enough about New Japan and its history, so I really dove in and started to learn the history of this great company. And ever since then, been now that's my full-time job is doing the announcing, the English commentary for New Japan Pro Wrestling. And it's been a lot of fun. The last few years have been very challenging with COVID, and the world was shut down, and we didn't know what was going to happen. And we're scrambling to try to get some content up, and now the Japan is far behind the United States and the rest of the world, as a matter of fact, in terms of like COVID restrictions. They're still very strict. In fact, they just recently opened up the borders to travel. You had to have a visa to come into the country, and now they finally dropped that requirement. But fans only are allowed to cheer in certain venues. It's venue specific, meaning they can always clap and stomp their feet, but even though everybody's wearing a mask, they were restricted from yelling and shouting, and so wrestlers are, and the Japanese crowd, of course, always has a reputation of being quiet, but this is next level quiet. This is no sound at all. And then occasionally you get this, and then when the heel's getting heat and they're still doing this, they figured out, well, I'm not going to clap because I'm not approving of what they're doing. So now it's like stone dead quiet. Oh my gosh. That's very difficult on the wrestlers. But everything is slowly getting back to normal, and probably by 2023 it will be as it was, as they take, but I still have to wear a mask when I do commentary. It's like I do commentary anywhere here in the States. You don't have to wear a mask anymore. You don't have to wear a mask when you fly, but when you enter Japanese airspace, you got to put the mask on. When we're 10,000 feet, as we're on descent, we're 10,000 feet now, you got to put your mask on. Japanese rule. It's like, okay. So it's a lot of patience for those of us who are like, all right, guys, come on. We've lived with this now for 2.5 years. I think we've got it figured out. And they still, and of course, it's great because they do temperature checks and they're making sure you're healthy. And if you're feeling under the weather at all, you let somebody know and they hold you out, and it's never a question, no problem at all. But born out of that, we started doing shows remotely. So a lot of times I'll sit here and call a live New Japan show that's going on in Japan, and we do it through Zoom. It's just like this interview. So I watch the monitor, I'm calling the show live, and it's being broadcast to the world. So my color commentator is in Japan, but sometimes not at the venue. I'm in the United States. We got the live show going on, and it all works together. Well, we've had some shows where one of my partners is from Australia. So it's been Chris in Japan, me in the States, Gino in Australia, and the show going on live. So it's made us better. If that's we're more storytellers as opposed to letting the crowd. A lot of times I'll lay out, and that was another Jim Ross lesson. Let the crowd do their thing, man. Don't fight them. If they're screaming and yelling, you don't have to scream and yell just let them have their voice. And so a lot of it is now, I didn't have the opportunity to lay out because there was silence. So I'm really having to tell more stories. But now as we're getting back into it, it's a refreshing sound. Like the first show that had cheering fans was back in the beginning of September. And they were so enthusiastic. They couldn't wait to cheer. And they were screaming and yelling for everything. So I didn't say very much that show. I let them, and the people were like, oh my God, Kevin, that was such a great show, because we got to hear the cheering and the fans were excited. And I was like, I didn't even say anything. I had no work to do on that one, but it's a blast. And learning the culture and learning just a little bit of the language. It's a very difficult language to learn, but you know enough to get around. Japan is a very Western friendly country. So it's beautiful to visit. It's one of the safest places in the world. You can go there with your family and you never have to worry about crime. You never have to worry about filth. It's incredibly clean. People are polite. And it's just been a lot of fun. It's a lot of time away from my family. I had, through the first 28 weeks of the year, I had been in Japan 20 weeks. So that's a lot. And it's a lot of wear and tear on my family. So, having an opportunity to be there and call the matches it's important, but trying to find that work family balance is always very, very tricky.
And they're running in the U.S. now too, correct?
Yeah, it's a whole separate brand, New Japan Strong. And again, that was born out of the pandemic and wanting content for the website for the world subscribers. We've got wrestlers in the United States, and we're able to run shows, and we can't have any crowds, but we can have wrestling matches. And they said, okay, let's try it. So that was very weird because there was no sound whatsoever. And I felt like I was calling golf. But then eventually got into it. And I said, listen, boys, I'm sorry if I'm distracting to you. And they said, no, it actually helps, because as you get, animated about something, then we're able to almost hear the crowd. And a couple times I couldn't be there live because I was doing something else. And they were like, oh, we missed having you there calling the match live, because then you were at least some voice. We hear, now we heard absolutely nothing. And it was very weird. But tough. Over time, it's grown, and it's his own. It's not quite a touring brand yet, but it's pay-per-view events on Fight TV, and the weekly show on Strong on New Japan World, which now is hosted by Ian Riccaboni, because I couldn't be there. Now that I started going back to Japan, I couldn't. It was very difficult to make the two schedules work out. So when Ian was done with Ring of Honor, we plugged him in. And it's been great, but it was a lot of fun getting to meet some guys that I had never met before, getting to see some faces from different companies who would come in and out. Like Josh Alexander has been wonderful, and the Young Lions from the LA Dojo were great, and everybody in the staff and crew has been a lot of fun to work with. Work with Fred Rosser, who you knew, of course. Did you work? You worked with him in Jersey, right? In the Indies?
Oh yeah, breaking in. Yeah, I had him on the show. I had him on the show. He was one of the first guys I interviewed. Yeah, he doesn't forget where he came from. Fred's a great guy.
I've talked to him several times about that, and being able to help him, as we retrace his steps. Fascinating guy, and I love him to death. And there's just been a whole wealth of talent, and some of them now have gone over to Japan. Like we just got to see Tom Lawler in the G1, and Royce Isaacs, who was a guy just kicking around trying to get a foothold, moved out to California, got the opportunity on Strong, that turned into New Japan bookings. Bad Dude Tito, same thing. Was just an indie guy in California, and now he's working in Japan, not full time, but done a couple tours, and will continue to be a fixture. And seeing the guys like David Finley and Jay White, who were Young Lions when I started, and now as great as they are, and the matches like with Will Ospreay and Shingo, and those are so exciting. And then when you get to call a Tanahashi match, an Okada match, I mean, come on, there's wrestling, and then there's those guys. It's art. It's art. It's physicality. It's everything. It's emotion, and it all connects and works. Getting to work with guys like Yuji Nagata, who was one of the first New Japan guys that I saw. I've been watching him on Nitro, and being able to see him in WCW, and Tenzan and Kojima and those guys. That third generation has been a lot of fun to work with. It's great. And the Japanese boys appreciate what we do in the English commentary, because they know that we help get them over, so that when they come to the United States or they go to England and they go anywhere in the Western speaking world, people know who they are instantly. And that was okay. So we're doing our job. We know we're doing our job right, because we're telling you that these guys are good. We're calling their great matches, and the people are able to understand their story, breaking down the language barrier even further. You could watch any. Were you a tape trader back in the day? I was not.
Yeah.
So I was not a guy, because I was working at the time and I didn't have time to do anything else but WWF. So, but people that watched Japanese wrestling loved it and didn't need the English commentary to understand what was going on. You watch the match and you see it, and they tell the physical story and you understand it. So we really need to add value to this. You've got to be, and that's where I was like, okay, I know I need to step up my game and tell more of their backstory and explain the hows and whys of why they do what they do, and what the symbolism of their gear means, and what their motivation is as they get into the ring. Explain that to the English speaking audience on a real deeper level. It's more than just calling moves. It's anybody can just call moves, but it needs to be, I had to know New Japan at the cellular level, and it had to be from the heart and very authentic, so that as I tell a guy's story, my credibility gives their story credibility. I couldn't fake it. And sometimes you can get away with that on a wrestling show with, on an indie show, let's just say, because you don't know who the guys are and you can get away with it. But I had to know who they were, because otherwise they'll just watch the Japanese commentary. We don't need English. They're not telling me anything I don't know anyway. So we had to just like really ramp that up. And having Chris Charlton to work with, who's like a historian, and speaks Japanese, so he understands when they talk trash to each other. He's there to translate. He's there to translate the promos. We were the first ones. We had the microphone at ringside, and stick that microphone out, so as the guys are walking through, I get little sound on tape from them to add to the story. And the Japanese announce team doesn't do that. Well, the English does. And sometimes I would pop over and let the English, Milano Collection AT, who understands English, I would say, he just said this. I would take my headset off or send Chris over and just clue those guys in as to what was being said at the desk, so that they could say to the Japanese audience, oh, when they were talking to the English team, they said this or that. So I try to look at it, and I'm my own producer. It's awesome. Nobody's in my ear. Nobody tells me what to say. Nobody says anything to me. I know when to start. I know when to finish. The team loves it. The world team, they don't have to do anything with me. They just take me out to ringside when it's time to sit down. They bring out the bottles of water for me. I got one piece of paper most of the time, and whatever notes I have. And like a guy, he's just a fan. His name's Chris Samsa. He's a stat nerd. He loves stats. So he began compiling stats about New Japan, timing matches, things like that. How long in a tag team, how long one guy was in the ring as opposed to his partner. Fall differential, like you win a match, a team wins a match, but you don't win the fall, so you're just there. But how many times in a tag situation you win the match? And how many times you win versus you lose. It's all like deep. And so I began to incorporate his stats in there, and I plugged the guy. Nobody told me not to. Nobody said I couldn't. And hey, this is from our pal Chris Samsa, the Chris Samsa on Twitter, sporterprowrestling.com. Okada so-and-so, has got this record. And it's just fascinating stuff that he pulls out. And so I incorporate it in the broadcast.
Wow.
I just try to get everybody over, Ace, even you.
Well, you're gonna, from this episode, how long have you been doing this?
31 years.
The passion in your voice when you talk about this.
Thank you.
I'm gonna air that. But it's just, oh my gosh, like I was talking to Steve Carino the other day.
Yeah.
And just he talks about pro wrestling like we did back in '94 at St. Matthew's Parish for Jim Kettner. He still talks about that. Like I'm listening to him talk, and I'm like pushing the hair on my arm down. That's just wow, Kevin. You blew me away with tonight. I can't thank you enough.
Yeah.
Anything you want to plug? Like you want to plug any social media?
If you want to follow me, you want to follow me on Twitter at Real Kevin Kelly. Look for my fan page on Facebook, Kevin Kelly. NJPW, I think it is. And we're getting ready to have a big shindig at the Ryogoku Sumo Hall coming up on October the 10th. So I'll be leaving on Saturday, flying over to Japan, and that's always a fun venue. That was where I got my start back in 2015. So we'll be there for Declaration of Power on October the 10th, and it's live with English commentary on njpwworld.com.
And if you want to book him for your YouTube show, you have to know him for 25 years.
Yeah.
And you have to reach out to him 77 times, and he'll say yes.
Just listen, I need you to be more assertive. When I tell you yes, you just tell me when. Are you good in September? Yes, I'm good in September. Are you good in October? If you're not feeling the passion, if you're not excited about it, then why are you doing it? I'm getting ready to, in 2023, I'm going to be helping promote. This is an exclusive. I'm going to be helping the wrestling that's based out of the Hamburg Fieldhouse, because I love that building and I love wrestling, and I want to see better wrestling in the Pennsylvania region. And so we're going to be bringing in some different stars, and we're going to be doing some things differently, but we're going to put, wrestling back on the map in Hamburg Fieldhouse, where, WWF taped for so many years, and Roddy Piper smashed the coconut over Snooka's head, and this memory, that memory. But, it's a historic venue, and we're going to be bringing some real quality pro wrestling there. So I'm excited to do that, and that's going to be getting started in January.